Hello, this is Dr. Mike Brooks. I'm a licensed psychologist and the director of the Austin Psychology and Assessment Center, or ApaCenter. Today's video blog topic is part A on the subject of does video game violence cause children and adolescents to become violent? And now I've done the other 7 segments. Hopefully you watch those in order and it all leads up to this. What can you do about it? As a parent, I'm a parent, and this is sort of where the rubber meets the road. And so I've got some suggestions for you, and hopefully you find these helpful as you wrestle with the video game dilemma with your own kids. So here we go, and I've got my iPad, and I'm going to be going through these on a PowerPoint, so you'll see the topic on the bullet point on the video, and I'll just be going through it here and then discussing these as we go along. So here we go. What can we do about it? So the first one with your kids is keep them involved in other activities. So I'm a big believer in an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and by keeping your kids involved in other activities, sports, music, art classes, whatever it is, Boy Scouts, just have them involved and engaged in activities, and then it'll naturally squeeze out the video game time. So, why fight a battle if you don't have to? And I've found with my own kids, this is probably the best strategy, is keep them involved in other activities. Because if they're at a tennis lesson or swimming, it's really hard to, play video games while they're on the tennis court or something like that. So, and this is sort of related, is a family do activities together. So what you're doing is opening up their eyes to all the different things out there that they can enjoy, and the experience of enjoying these different things ultimately will be self-reinforcing. And whether you go canoeing or hiking or to different parks and water parks, there's endless things to do. And so as a family to do them together is going to help naturally, again, squeeze out the video game time, and it's going to open up their eyes and experientially to many fun, enjoyable things that they can do. This next one is be a role model. So this sort of goes with the previous point, is how can you expect your child to manage their video game and technology use if you are not managing your own? So it's very important for us as adults to set our own limits and parameters around our technology use. And I've found this in my own life, that I might be quick to say, my kids need to get off the iPad or off a game or something like that, but yet I'm checking my email or something like that on my iPhone or iPad, or going to the laptop. So, you might be at the family dinner sitting down with your phone on the table and checking text or things like that, and what message does that send to your children? So instead of focusing all your energy on trying to manage your kids' video game time and their technology use, is first ensure that you're managing your own, and they can see that, and you can articulate that sometimes too, of like, if it's family dinner time, you might say something like, oh, well, it's time for us to all sit down together as a dinner. I am turning off my phone so I can enjoy, our company together and our time together here. And that sends a message to your kids without it being about restricting them. So this next point is get involved and be active. So first off is arrange that much of gaming time is a privilege and not a right. So this is one of these things you can do on the front end as you're establishing the parameters under which video games can be played, is that perhaps they need to finish their homework first or their chores first and other obligations, so that they don't start with the video games and then try to squeeze in homework. Develop time limits, enforce them, and be consistent. So if it's during the week, they have an hour a day for media time. For my wife and I, we just call it media time, so they can choose whether it's video game time or TV time, game on the iPad. It's all the same. But you set the parameters and then you enforce them. A big one is setting limits on access to games and gaming devices so that the games are less accessible. For instance, having kids with a whole TV set up and a video game set up in their bedroom is a recipe for trouble. It's very difficult to enforce those limits, so rather than trying to enforce that, don't put them in there to begin with. And the same with laptops and computers. They may be in common areas. And I know with portable devices this is harder and harder to enforce, but there will be some ways that you're able to do this. All electronics off by a certain time of night. That's a good one. And I've heard families doing this where with teens and stuff that they have a designated place where all cell phones and things have to be placed by a certain time at night, and that would go for adults as well. So again, we should be managing our own technology use and demonstrating to our kids what it's like to self-regulate. So we need to be able to do this ourselves, so it'd be a good idea for us to set those same kind of time limits and restrictions. So on the next one, I'm going to talk about goals. Now, there are age and developmental differences here, and even individual differences with each kid. I have 3 kids, and I notice each one has their own personality. And sometimes you have to deal a little bit differently with each kid, and then they're getting older, and then you have to change things as they get older. And for younger kids, it may be a little bit more of a top-down relationship, so use the parent maybe setting the restrictions and limitations more. But ultimately, and this is really important, the goal is self-regulation. The kids need to be able to regulate themselves, because after all, when they get to college, you're not going to be there to, tell them to get off the Call of Duty or World of Warcraft or stop texting at night and things like that. So developmentally, they need to gain more and more opportunities to manage their own gaming time and their technology use. And so when they're younger, they have less room for that, but as they get older, you do want to negotiate with them and talk to them about, what are their goals in terms of grades, sports or music accomplishments, or income, productivity, after-school job or projects that they want to complete, and ask them what their goals are for themselves, and ask them, well, where does gaming fit in this? And so, in essence, you want your child to be asking themselves of, is what I'm doing with my video game and technology use helping me achieve my goals, or is it getting in the way of my goals? And in a way, you want to try to partner with your child to help them achieve their own goals for themselves. So it's not the parents' goals, I want my child to get all A's and this and that. Well, instead of it being top down that I'm trying to get my child to get all A's and B's or whatever, because that's my goal for my child, ask my child, hey, Archer, what are your goals with regard to grades? What would you like to get? What makes you happy or satisfied? Most kids want to get good grades. So instead of it being about the parents trying to get their child or get your child to get good grades because you want them to, look, they want to get those good grades. And then having your child see that their video game use could either get in the way of their goals or, maybe not, depending on how they manage it. And in partnering with your child is collaboratively problem solving this. So if they are running into difficulties and they say, I want to get all A's, and yet they're playing whatever video game, the latest Mario game, they want to play it 2 or 3 hours a day, or Minecraft, that's the big one that they're all playing, is asking your child, you say you want to get all A's, but I see that you also really like Minecraft. About how many hours, can you play Minecraft and still get all A's? What do you think? What's going to help you set down Minecraft? When do you think you should play? And so you're having this dialogue with your child and working with them instead of telling them what to do. If you're telling them what to do, they don't learn to manage it themselves, nor do they get to give themselves the credit for success. All right. I hope that made sense. I'm really passionate about that, as you can probably tell. The next one is what to do about games. Go to the Entertainment Software Rating Board, the esrb.org, and index ratings. So when we're talking about particular video games and stuff now, so we kind of like got a general framework, but now we start looking at, okay, well, what about particular games? What do I do then? Go to the esrb.org and you can index all the games and look at what they're rated and why they're rated that way. Steer clear of games with realistic depictions of violence and ones in which the player is the antagonist and not the protagonist. So, as we talked about before, just because the violence is detailed doesn't mean it's realistic, as in like life. There's Call of Duty and there's Halo. I think Call of Duty is much more lifelike than Halo. So if I have a teen, when I have a teen, and they're, looking at each game, I'm going to steer them toward Halo if, I think that they're able to handle the content, of course, but rather than Call of Duty, which I think is much more graphically violent and realistic. You want to steer your child away from games that are known to be time suckers, like World of Warcraft, or online role-playing games that require a certain level of commitment to be proficient in it. Again, this may be an uphill battle, and the older they get, the more they'll be drawn to some of these games, but while you can, is steering them to games that have maybe a shorter lifespan or that aren't online, and especially for younger kids, you don't want them on the online games early. Next point, sit down with your child and see what they're playing. Play with them. So if your child's very into Minecraft, just sit down with them and say, hey, what are you doing? Let me see how this works. Tell me about it. It's amazing how rich and complex these games are and how much the kids know about them. And also, while you're sitting down, you can see, screen the content, like, whoa, I didn't know that was in there. And you might have to put a stop to some games that you thought were appropriate and you find out that aren't. But taking an interest in these gaming worlds, because this is very important to your child, and they'll spend a lot of time in Minecraft building and crafting things and other games of learning, and they want to tell you about Pokemon and how they've captured all these ones and evolved them. Is get into that world, and because it can be a powerful connecting time to understand the video game experience and what it means to your child. And last point on about the particular games is just there are so many wonderful non-violent games out there, low violent games, all the Mario games and the Lego games and Minecraft and things like that. Is if you're active in your child's gaming, is you can keep your eye out there for reviews of games that are appropriate, or talk to other parents, talk to kids. You can look on sites like GameSpot.com and find out what are the latest releases and how well are they regarded. They get high reviews, and then you can kind of say, hey, here's a good game, maybe I'll try out this. So here's some final thoughts. And I sort of touched on this in a way, but Your relationship with your child is your leverage of influence. The better relationship you have with your child, the more likely you will get compliance, or at least not as much active resistance when you set limits on gaming. So that's why spending quality time with your child outside of gaming, throwing the football or hiking and things like that, watching your child and maybe playing with your child on some games, because the more connected you are with your child and engage in positive connecting experiences, then when you have to set limits, you have a greater leverage of influence. If all your interactions with your child are about setting limits and taking privileges away and things like that, that's not a relationship. And it's less likely your child is going to be receptive to the limits that you set with him or her. So that's why, instead of focusing on all the limit setting and investing your time and energy to which video games you're going to limit access to and how you're going to do it and all these things, invest more of that energy to the relationship building with your child, so that way when you do need to place the limits or collaboratively problem solve about the limits with your child will be much more receptive. So that is it for this 8th part of the series of Does Video Game Violence Cause Children and Adolescents to Become Violent? I hope that you've enjoyed this, and if this is the only segment you saw, I hope you see the other ones, because there's good content there too. But like I said, this is sort of where the rubber meets the road as a parent, and I know it's a struggle. I'm a parent myself, and it's a moving target, but having a few overarching ideas, tools, and strategies in your toolkit can help you navigate these waters a little better, and I hope that these presentations have served to that end. So this is Dr. Mike Brooks from the Austin Psychology and Assessment Center, or ApaCenter. Thanks so much for joining me today.